Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Green Tea Podcast. I'm sure you missed us. This is Crazy Grace.
And Emma.
So today's episode is all about changes and what kind of changes are coming to the Green Tea Podcast. Now, changes can be uncomfortable. They can be in relationships, work, your age. Sometimes we want to change, and sometimes the universe forces us to change. How can we be comfortable with changes in our life and welcome them so that it benefits us in the most positive ways? Well, to start off, Emma, what is in the forecast for this month in astrology?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, we are coming up on Scorpio season at the end of October. It's, I think, October 23rd until November 21st this year, 2024. And interestingly enough, like Scorpio rules change in a weird way. It rules like this understanding that life is cyclical in nature, that endings are really just new beginnings in another form.
Mhm.
So that's one thing that I think was just really interesting and auspicious about the timing of even this episode, with change, is that it's falling in line with Scorpio season. So I can share more about that right now, or we can just weave it into the conversation, whatever you think is best.
Yeah, because, well, typically when we think of Scorpios, we think of some intense energy. Now, when you're talking about Scorpios in terms of change, is that different from you describing Scorpio horoscopes?
Sorry, there are traits that Scorpios have, such as things like, being a little bit intense in the way that they are. They're very deep, they're very investigative, probing, things like that, like all the things we talked about, right? And so I think one of the other interesting aspects is that, like, part of the reason that Scorpio is like this is because it can understand that there's like an undertone, or there are things that are looming under the surface beyond what we see, and so sometimes Scorpio finds safety in investigating and finding out those details, because then it kind of feels like it's a way to protect itself. It's a way to feel prepared for whether it's change, or feel prepared in case something were to go awry or something to go wrong. They feel like the more knowledge that they have, they can prevent themselves from being hurt. So that's kind of like I don't say psychology, but almost like the psychology of how Scorpio works. And so the thing is that, like, other things related to Scorpio, like Pluto energy or the eighth house, rule themes like endings, grief, transformation, shared resources. And so if you think about change, right, we talked about this, like endings and new beginnings, cycles and the cyclical nature. Endings are like one of the things that are found like within change, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
you said it really well, right? Like sometimes they're welcomed and sometimes it feels more like force, right?
Yeah.
But either way, it can feel a lot like, an ending is occurring, and that can also bring about some of the darker topics like some of the darker topics within sort of Scorpio energy, such as
Mhm.
grief and pain, because sometimes that's what happens when we are faced with making a change, is we have to grieve an ending, even if it's a welcome change. We might feel sad that we have to let go of all the great things that we're walking away from, or there's fear of the unknown that's involved when it comes to change, and so that can stir up some like latent emotion within us. So yeah, that's how kind of all of that works. The other thing too is transformation is like one of the biggest themes, I'd say, of Scorpio
Mm.
season. This idea of like the phoenix rising from the ashes, as some astrologers will say. So yeah, you can see how that ties in really well to the endings idea and the cyclical nature of change.
So I get to start off. Do you have, or I have as well, our host, have some Scorpios in our charts, and what can we be looking forward to individually, and how can people find that in their own charts?
Sure. So I know that for the two of us, I don't think that you have any actual placements in Scorpio, but I know that you have some activity going on in the eighth house, which is the house naturally ruled by Scorpio. So things like, I think you have the sun and Mercury there. You might have Venus as well, but I think at least the sun and Mercury for you are sitting in the eighth house. So that's where you might feel a lot of this more scorpionic energy. For me, I have North Node in Scorpio in my seventh house. The North Node is, our life purpose indicators. So my North Node is in Scorpio. It sits in the seventh house, which means if you look at my chart and you look at the seventh house, the little pie piece with the number 7, that's the area of life where I will most probably contact like that type of energy, or that area of my life is where I bring scorpionic energy the most. And for me, that's the seventh house of relationships. It's relationships with like other individuals. It's the relationship with the public. It's also beauty, aesthetics, things like that. And so, just to give an example, I suppose, right? Like for a lot of my life with the North Node in the seventh house, I've been called to really allow myself to be transformed by my relationships and to also, in a sense, like bring a certain level of like transformation to my
Mm.
relationships. Now, the one thing I will say is throughout my life, relationships have been a bit of a weird, I don't want to say a weird thing for me, but it has definitely taken me time to learn how to connect with somebody on like a deep, intimate level. I think it comes pretty naturally to me to form a lot of surface level connections with people. Like it's relatively, I don't want to say easy, but relatively easy for me to be friendly but distant.
Mm.
But to really mesh with somebody on a deep level, but like develop a deep connection, that's a very scorpionic trait in nature. And so I've had to really learn a lot about changing the way that I relate to other people and relationships. Like I've had to uncover and investigate Scorpio deep into my own subconscious patterns and fears and anxieties around connecting with people on a deep level. And so that's how Scorpio in the seventh house has been playing out for me in a lot of my life. Yeah, that's an example.
That's interesting because I remember in our future kids episode, you're like, you want to dive into this deep emotional aspect with a romantic partner, but you say that it's been difficult because you want to distance yourself.
Yes.
How do you connect those two?
Yeah. So I think that I think when I was younger, I was content with like not really having this really like deep and intimate kind of love in my life. I was like, oh, like eventually it'll happen. I'll just avoid that until, it really comes to me. Um, and so I think like a lot of it has to do with self-reflection and like really looking at the reasons why I desire something but then also fear it at the same time. I think there are a lot of situations that we can find ourselves in, whether that's in a relationship or a job or something. Say that you have a career prospect in front of you and you really want to take it but you're scared out of your mind to actually take it. You know what I mean? There's a internal conflict I think going on there. And so for me, a lot of it came by, like I said, kind of digging deep into the reasonings, like whether it's trauma or just past betrayals or just a mindset that I have, that it's scary to connect with people on a deep level. And so I'm able to employ certain things that Scorpio offers, such as, right, like being vulnerable about how I feel, and allowing myself to connect with somebody in a deep way through sharing intimately and through sharing vulnerably and not shying away from things that I might want to hide from somebody or just feel uncomfortable sharing. Um, and yeah, it's been like a dance, you know what I mean? Like to try to figure out like a good balance for myself. But at the end of the day, I do really desire, a deep connection with somebody. And I know that that's only going to happen if I'm actually in a place to receive that, to actually connect with somebody in that way.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that doesn't just apply to romantic. I think it's also like friendship
Yeah.
relationships. Like I could totally relate to what you said where, opposite of me, it was hard for me to connect with friendship, like even female friends in
Yeah.
a deep way. So to open up yourself to be vulnerable and to find just friends where you can just tell anything and they'll be there for you. It's really special,
Mhm.
something that I had to learn as well.
Yeah. Do you have any other like examples or changes that you're going through recently or that you've gone through that, you've really had to like tap into this type of Scorpio energy or
Yes. So I think all my life, when it came to changes, it was always on my terms.
mm,
So when I turned, I think, 20 years old, I really always wanted to go to Korea and just like give up everything in America and just have this whole change in my life. So I did it. It was on my terms. But then I feel like recently, when it comes to certain career points in my life and love points in my life specifically, I feel like the universe ends things for me. And I'm like, whoa, like, it's not in my control. What the heck? Like I thought I
mhm.
was on a good way when it comes to my career. Like I'm rising, I'm working hard, and the universe is like, nope, just like flicks me out. And it's like, damn, what did I do? I'm not even that bad of a person. So recently, starting last year, I went through this whole transformation when it came to relationship and career. And looking back now, I feel like the universe really had to again flick me because I wasn't growing in a way. So my personality usually is very passive. I am not outspoken. Although I'm in entertainment, it's odd that I'm kind of like that behind the cameras. And I think the universe was really pushing me to not do that. Like step into my Aries energy. Like you said, I have Aries and Moon. And I've really, for the last 2 years, grown to step into Aries grace, where I am outspoken, where I am telling people honest opinions about what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been learning for the last 2 years. Even with career, I was doing well, but I guess I wasn't seeing that I had to change something and grow. So starting last year, I really got into beauty, and that has transformed into a very positive way where I'm making good money from it. People are seeing me as K beauty influencer. I'm being invited to a lot of these events, and I'm really happy in my career. I don't know what's next, but without that like massive flick from the universe starting last year, would I have been here? Would I have changed? Probably not. And I had this one relationship encounter with somebody where I've always been passive, and maybe the universe flicked me something that I couldn't do, which is to be outspoken. So I've noticed myself change a lot. Even like yesterday, I went to this like big penthouse party, and I was just so happy talking to people. And I would never go up to people, but I literally went up to with a big smile and said hello to a lot of people
Yes.
there, and just not being shy, not caring, and just a lot of people were open. Nobody's gonna like say fuck you and walk away. Like a lot of people just want to get to know you too. So changes in that. Or I had somebody contact me, and I was dissatisfied with their services. Normal Grace would just kind of be passive and say thank you and walk away. But I just told her like, hey, I was dissatisfied with ABC in a nice way. So I'm kind of proud of myself. It just feels so, in Korean we say like soda, where it's just like popping and I'm not like holding anything back.
Mhm.
So those are the two major changes I had, and maybe they are for my positive benefit if I look at it that way.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I love that you just shared that, and it brings up something that I forgot to mention with excuse me, with Scorpio as well, is like one of the things that Scorpio energy desires is control, like to control a situation. And, because that's where it feels most safe. And the other thing is Scorpio represents taking this leap, if you will, into the unknown, or more so trusting in the unknown. The opposite of Scorpio is Taurus, and Taurus is all about the comfort zone.
Mm,
So when you step away from like Taurus energy and into Scorpio energy, one of the things that you can see is a call to trust in the unknown and to trust that whatever comfort zone you are leaving is for like your highest and greatest good, if you will, right? And so sometimes that naturally, can evoke certain amounts of fear in us because it's unknown. Like we don't know what to
mhm.
expect. We don't know if it's going to be better than where we came from. We don't know if it's going to be safe, all these things. So I think you make a really good point about that too, about how like sometimes if you come to the edge of how willing you are to actually take a leap, sometimes the universe comes in and gives you that like assist to kind of push you, where you want to be going. So I think that that's really neat. um
Yeah. Have you
yeah.
had recently experience where not only your control, but do you think the universe really pushed you to like be like, hey, Emma, like you better change. Like I'm gonna force you to.
Yes. I'm trying to think of like a good example to give because I had one the other day that was really, really random.
Mm,
um
that's pretty recent the other day.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't about anything big in my life though. That's why I'm like I can't remember what it was, but I guess I'll
Yeah.
just go for a career one, right? So I guess one of the things for me that I've had a lot of changes with over the past, it's really been several years, um, is my career. I've been trying to figure out how am I going to utilize astrology and what is the best way for me to want to do this. And I have this habit of sometimes staying in these other freelance jobs to like pay my bills and stay comfortable, and I want to have like all the extra material security and everything. It's very Taurus rising of me. And yeah, I just have kind of gotten to a point recently where there was this, one kind of freelance job that I had, and I wasn't really enjoying it. Environment's not good.
Mhm.
It's just a big red no, 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 that the universe is trying to, I think, throw it in my face at this point. But I've just kind of been holding on a little bit to it out of comfort and out of security, material security in this situation. And I recently had, I don't want to share too much about it only because I'm not allowed to really share, but I have recently had another opportunity that would definitely take me out of my comfort zone, but it's also definitely where I want to be going. It's more focused on astrology, and it's in a way that I think really
Mhm.
is going to work for me. Something I'm going to really enjoy while also actually teaching me certain skill sets that I know that I want to work through. And for a while, I actually sort of like rejected this opportunity. I was like, oh, I'm just going to keep avoiding it and I'm not going to, whatever. And eventually, of course, it came back around. And I just had this feeling of like, Emma, you got to take this now. Stop running away from it. Just welcome the change, take the leap, stop fearing the unknown, and stop sitting in your comfort zone. Like nothing is growing here. In fact, things are getting worse being in this
Mhm.
comfort zone. Like the toxicity of the environment and like the lack of trust between staff or whatever, it's like it's creating more of a negative environment now. It's no longer just plateauing, it's actually making things worse. So, I think that's one of the things for me that can be a
Mhm.
struggle sometimes for certain things, is I'll stay in places that I've severely outgrown out of fear of what's unknown.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also like human nature, that you
Yeah,
just want to stay in your comfort.
of course.
So yeah, a lot of people just stay where they want to be.
Yeah.
It's just like never outgrowing your parents, right? You just want to stay a kid, but you can't, like, that's something
Yeah.
you can't control. It's like growth pains, I think you call it here.
Yeah.
I think one of crazy ideas that I had recently, because I just came back from Thailand and Korea, and it just was a really great trip, especially Thailand. Like, didn't know how amazing the vibe and energy of the Thailand people. They're very well, I don't know if they're spiritual, but they're very kind to other people. There's
Mm.
this like understanding of you and I and us. And it got me thinking, like, do I need to have a change of move? Maybe back to
Mm.
Asia for a couple of months. Like, it's a little, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen, but even that kind of a big change, is it calling me because I need it? Is it calling me because it's something in the future, it's like set in stone, or am I just doing it because I'm feeling some kind of a pain and I want to run away? I'm not sure.
Mm. Mm.
But those kind of change thoughts have been coming into my thoughts forms.
Yeah. Wait, this is so random, but it's so funny that you say that because um I've had to ask myself that question so many times. For anybody that doesn't know, I have this habit of like moving around a lot or always like wanting to move around
Oh,
just
really?
because. Yeah. Now, to be fair, I have a Sagittarius moon, and I also have like a Venus in Sagittarius. I have a bunch of other things in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is a sign that is like nurtured by expansion, freedom, the ability to travel, and it doesn't like to be confined to like one space. I know that you have several things in Gemini and Aries as well. Like they share a similar energy to Sagittarius of being explorative, I would say, with Aries, and then curious and wanting to learn with Gemini. So you might also experience a similar trait or a similar feeling. But I do know that there was one time, for example, it was back kind of right after COVID or during COVID, I guess, in some places. I was living in New York and I decided to move to California. And I remember asking myself as I was making this move, like, am I actually moving because I want to be moving here? Or am I moving because I feel like stuck or stagnant or like I'm running away from something in my
Yeah.
life here in New York? And to be fair, I actually think I don't want to say it was both, but I want to say that regardless of what it was, it actually kind of worked in my favor because by the time that I came back, I had clarity around the fact that, like, oh, this is a problem. Like when I was living out in California, I realized, oh, this is a problem that I have, and moving is not going to fix that problem. I need to deal with that. But at the same time, moving also did afford me an opportunity to like kind of clear my head and connect with new people and like see the world from a different lens and see like possibilities in a new way. So that's, I think, the irony of it all too is like sometimes even if, for example, you are move because you're trying to run away from something, I think there's still so much possibility and potential to learn from that experience anyway, even if that's simply coming to grips with the fact that certain things are not going to be alleviated by making that move. But I do
Hmm.
think that, I had always felt drawn to California. There was always a part of me that was like, oh, I want to go live out there and just be in nature and see all the stuff and da da da, whatever. And I think for that, I gained a much greater love and respect for nature, for Mother Earth, um, and for the ability to be able to travel and stuff. So I do think that part of it was actually motivated by this higher, if you will, higher self version of me. Um, but I guess that's the thing, right? There can be several things that are true at the same time, that I did want to go and it was inspiring growth, but at the same time I had this realization that traveling is not always going to solve your problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like you've told me that your future dream is always to backpack around or like travel around. So maybe that also has to do something with your Sagittarius, you say.
Yeah, definitely. I would say so, for sure. Hmm.
Yeah. I did want to talk about relationship changes. So there's been something that's been really bothering me and then ticking me that's just like been coming up.
Okay.
So like recently I've realized that it's I don't want to say men. Like I really don't. I don't want to contrast like male and females, but
Mm,
I do feel like I have been put in this position where somebody had really not been honest with me and dishonesty.
mm,
And that has been really ticking me off. Even
mm,
little stuff now, maybe it comes from this trauma, right? For example, yesterday I went to again the party, and then one of the guys was we talked for a while, and he said, "Let's go to the bar downstairs." It was a really nice bar. He said, "I'll be back in 5 minutes, so we can get our stuff and things like that." Come to find out, he goes starts talking to other women, which there's nothing between us, but he pretended like nothing happened. It's like, "Oh, bye."
oh,
But
yeah.
it's like those little stuff. It's like you could have communicate with the person and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, change of plans, but let's do it next time." Clean and simple, right?
Yeah.
But then for somebody to lead you on like that and then just say like, "Oh, sorry," and just ignore you. It's just like, why would you even say that in the beginning? Something that you didn't even mean. And this has nothing to do with romantic friendship, strangers. It's just like human to human respect to have just honesty and even in those little moments. So even when I'm working with somebody and it seems like they're not keeping their agreement or promise, and I'm a very open person, as long as you communicate, it's like I'm totally okay with it. But yeah, that's been ticking me off. And I guess like starting moving forward, I really want to find people like the group of circle that I'm in where people are honest and open and communicative.
Yeah.
Everybody lies. Everybody says things that they don't mean time to time, but you know what I mean. I think
Yeah.
I don't know what it is in the air. People have really lost just respect for the strangers and just like keeping their words.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally thanks for sharing that, by the way. I can totally relate to what you're saying, and I think it is so frustrating, right? When like somebody says one thing but then acts in another way, right? Or whatever the case may be. And it's tough because I think to your one of the points that you made earlier about like how you used to be kind of passive, more passive grace, like I noticed that about people in general. And I'm not excluding myself from that either. I've definitely had moments where like I've kind of just like avoided, like
Yeah.
saying the truth of something and a lot of times, of course, it had nothing to do with the other person. It had everything to do with me and just feeling uncomfortable with confrontation or uncomfortable about being honest because I was afraid of the reaction that somebody might have. And so I think that's like a really interesting thing, right? How sometimes we as humans can cope with what's uncomfortable by avoiding or by running away,
Mhm.
whether it's running away from your responsibilities and moving to another country or simply not being transparent and like forthcoming with somebody about your intentions or whatever, you know what I mean? But it is frustrating, right? Because it does feel sometimes like kind of like a lack of respect, even if you actually sit down and think about it, it's really a lot of times has nothing to do with you. But yeah, I can
Yeah.
really relate to that, like wanting to be around people who are more transparent. And actually, I mean, even I guess we're gonna get into this in a minute anyway, but even you and I, like we were on the phone the other day talking about the podcast, talking about just life, and I brought up to you, hey, these are some things that I'm kind of feeling about the podcast and where we're at and where we're going. And I could have just avoided that. Like I could have just avoided the conversation. I could have just like one day dropped a bomb like, "Oh, this is how I'm feeling," or "I don't want to do this," or "I
Yeah.
do want to do whatever." But I'm like, that's not the right way to go about that. You know what I mean? Because I know that one of the things that I think we can do fairly well is communicate with each other when we really need to about something. So I think that's important, like to find people that you feel you can actually have open dialogue with in any capacity, whether it's something serious or not, whether it's romance, business, friends, it doesn't matter. Like it's really important to have open communication. I think sometimes that can be the difference between like relationships working out and not working out.
Yeah. And I've realized that communication is everything to humans because I just can't fathom the idea that you built, whether it's romantic, friendship, family, you build, it takes so long to build something. And then when you have one miscommunication or one thing wrong you did and it's not talked about, it's like everything just come crashing down, especially it's severe in romantic relationships. How
Right.
could you be so intimate with somebody for years and then for whatever incident, it just comes crashing down like a building that's been bombed.
Yeah.
So I think I am definitely learning, and maybe you are as well, that like avoiding things is just gonna make things worse. And you just
Yes.
really have to be communicative, open, and maybe the world is the same and I'm changing. So maybe that's how I'm seeing the world right now. It's ticking me off.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, if it's something that you're conscious of, that you're also actively trying to change about yourself, I think it naturally can make it more obvious when you do come in contact with people who are farther from that change that you're trying to make, for sure. I really relate to all this crazy conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually had a crazy dream recently where it was a dream. I was in Korea with my friend Suji, and then we actually were in Korea not too long ago. But
Mm.
in the dream, like we got an Airbnb and it was really tiny. There was one bathroom, and I was like, "Oh my God," but whatever. And then in the dream, we were like keep knocking things off by accident, our luggages and stuff. And then the homeowner started to knock on our door because we were making so much noise. So I remember in the dream, I was like, oh my God, like normally I would not want to answer and just keep quiet because you don't want to be confronted. But I remember going, no, that's not right. Like, I'm going to say, I'm sorry for making the noise. So I go to the door. There's two women. They look at us. And once we say, I'm sorry, they're like, oh, it's okay. And then she starts like showing us around our Airbnb. I told you the Airbnb was tiny, but then it morphed into this like mansion that like 200 people could fit. And there was like a rose room. There was like crazy like it was really cool in my dream. And then there was even like a purple, really vibrant color like gym kind of area where you could do play basketball and like make all kinds of content. And then another dream about like this huge like hotel being built and this like massive like ramen bowl. I don't know why it was a theme about massiveness. And
Yeah.
I think what I got from the dream was that like we're looking at things so small because we choose to when things are very massive in our lives. So yeah, I think that could be another sign of change. Just kind of like change your perspective and you'll notice that things you're very abundant.
Right. I love that. And the other thing that kind of stands out to me now that you're telling me this story is like, sometimes we think avoiding confrontation is going to help us because we assume that confrontation also leads to some type of conflict or mess, but sometimes it doesn't. Like in the dream, I mean, unless I have it wrong, of course, like in the dream, it's like you open the door, whatever, this person confronted you, and then like goodness came from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the other thing. Like sometimes you might be avoiding something, but then you finally have the conversation and you realize, like, oh my God, this person feels the same way. Like, who would have thought? Confrontation doesn't always have to lead to conflict. And I think that's something that we fear a lot of times
Mhm.
naturally. But I also wanted to add too, because you were just saying that Scorpio season coming up. That's what we're talking about. It's 333. Scorpio
Wow.
also has this habit of being like, it can be, not everybody is going to do this, I'm saying, but it can be passive aggressive in nature, where like if it feels some type of way about something, instead of directly confronting the issue, it'll kind of passively try to make comments or do certain things to try to manipulate somebody into finally seeing that they're upset. And it's interesting because Scorpio and Aries are the two signs that are ruled by Mars, and Mars is all about taking action and asserting yourself. But they do it in a different way. Scorpio is water, and Aries is fire. Aries is more like that direct, bold, like right in your face. It just goes for the jugular, if you will, not necessarily in a bad way, but it's just very direct. Scorpio has that same intensity as maybe Aries, but it's not necessarily like a quick punch to the gut. It's more of like that controlled like intensity that
Mhm.
uh there was somebody that there's an astrologer online that posted something about the comparison between Aries and Scorpio, and it said something about how Aries, I can't remember who the person is, by the way, but Aries is like a punch to the gut and Scorpio is like a dog that bites hard. So you can kind of imagine the difference. It's still tough, it's
Mm.
still, intense, but one is more of that like slow burn, if you will, and one of it's like a fast acting type of directness. And so if you think about bringing that up to say, if you think about the way that they approach conflict or they approach confrontation, it can sometimes be in that sort of way. So you can see how the more passive aggressive form is like this weird blend of like still trying to be passive but also aggressive and direct at the same time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That reminds me, I feel like why do Scorpio men have such a bad rep? I met a couple Scorpio men. It's like, wait, is it kind of true? There's something like controlling and like intense. I don't know if it's the same with Scorpio women, but it just reminded me when you said a dog biting hard.
Right. I think one of the things that, and this is, by the way, like I've actually attracted a lot of Scorpios in my life, and I really, really love Scorpio energy, especially in its higher embodiment. But I can see that, like, certain, like you said, certain signs do kind of have a bad reputation on the internet. Like Scorpio is one of them, Virgo is another, Gemini is another one that kind of can get a bad reputation on the internet. Like, unfounded, though I'm saying sometimes it's very unfounded. But one of the reasons that I think Scorpio can kind of get a bit of this reputation is because Scorpio naturally rules the dark things in life, like the unpleasant things, like death, decay, pain, discomfort. Like it's unpleasant things. And so people that are naturally born with that type of energy, like radiating off of them, it's skepticism, it's deceit, it's passive aggressiveness. I think people are bothered by that because they feel, I think sometimes, and I can't speak for everybody, but based on the things that I've read just all over the internet, people feel deceived by that, and they feel like they can't trust somebody who behaves in that way, or yada yada yada. Again, I'm not saying that everybody who's a Scorpio acts like this at
Mhm.
all, um but I think that can be one of the reasons, is that Scorpio is very self-protective, it can be very insecure, and it can fear confrontation and stuff so much that it just prefers to brood in its own energy, and then be passive aggressive in the way that it does things, or even go so far as to be just deceitful, and hiding its true intentions or something like that,
Oh,
which people naturally, they don't appreciate. So
yeah, I think
yeah.
that's why I'm kind of like Team Aries. I've never met Aries men, but if I'm
Oh,
imagining an Aries man, I'm more like Team Aries person because I think I love how Aries are just like you said, just a punch. They go for it. They're like a hero for their own lives. It's just the boldness is so attractive to me, and that's maybe because the Aries one, like I want to become that. So, and
yeah.
Team Aries, wait, what are Aries men like? It's like a little different.
I would say that, I mean, I would say that, like, Aries men, or just Aries in general, kind of are usually like a little bit more direct, but it also depends, like, on how their sun sign is being aspected or whatever else is in their chart. If they have other things that kind of dim
So,
that down, they may not carry that energy so much. But in their highest embodiment, Aries individuals are very bold, they're direct, they're courageous, they're fearless. These are people who don't wait for permission, they just go and they take the leap, and then everyone else
mm,
follows. This is why they're the first sign of the zodiac, and leadership is one of their strengths. It's because they embody a fearlessness and a courage that is meant for all of us to kind of like take heed of. um there was something else that I was going to say. Oh yeah, no,
mhm.
I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. Aries shadow is being a little bit more forceful, domineering, aggressive. You could say violent, but I definitely want to be clear that I'm not saying that all Aries men are violent, by the way. It's just the quality of Aries. And if you think about it, fire in general, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, fire is force. Like, fire signs represent life and vitality and force. And so sometimes the shadow of fire in general can be somebody that is very forceful, and they may try to instigate change or to get what they want with force, by trying to force something to happen, whether that's forcing another person, forcing themselves, forcing a situation. They can come off intense in that type of way, whereas water can sometimes be more manipulative in a sense, instead of being direct about like trying to change something. It'll try to go under the surface and like move things around or get people to believe a certain thing or feel a certain way or manipulate a situation to go in their favor. Um, there's also an element of like the victim mentality that plays into that, or displays of emotion in order to get people to react a certain way. But one of the things I wanted to bring up that kind of relates to what you're saying is, I remember I have had this happen a few times, but I've worked in workplaces before where I would notice two strong characters. And one of them was a Sagittarius dominant person, the other was like a Scorpio dominant person. And I noticed, like, right away that they both are very intense individuals and have no problem like really asserting when something is wrong, or taking action when something is wrong. But the person who is more Sagittarian in nature was known to be much more outwardly aggressive, like loud, aggressive, almost some people would say mean. The other person wasn't necessarily outwardly like as explosive or rude or mean to your face, but kind of like passive in the way that they start speaking to you or not speaking to you, maybe talking about you or saying things to other people behind your back or something like that. And so I thought that was really interesting that like both of them go about, like they'll have the same issue, but the way that they both go about addressing it is like totally different. And it sort of fits like with the astrology of it. And I
Mm.
remember that and this is not to draw a comparison, but I do remember a lot of the other people that I had worked with would express that, you know, they didn't like that the girl that was more Sagittarian dominant was so aggressive, but they always felt like, well, at least I know that's how she really feels. You know what I mean? And I see that she's angry. It doesn't feel like maybe she's one way to my face, but then a different way behind my back, or I don't have to really worry that she's saying anything different, like behind my back to people. She's just saying it outright to my face, which I find really interesting. I'm not trying to say that one is better than the other. It's nothing like that. But I just think it's interesting how even with the astrology, you could see their behavior was different based on like the dominant signs and archetypes in their charts.
Yeah, like it's the same problem, the same apple, but just the different ways that we can look at it. It's just
Right.
crazy how everything's just perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I want to talk about navigating changes and how we can more smoothly and use changes to our positivity.
Mm.
Number one, it says understanding change. Explore the nature of change, why it happens, the emotional impact it can have, and the importance of acceptance. I do really think that when it comes to change, especially the hardship that I said I was going through the past year and a half, it was hard for me to accept it. But I think
Mhm.
now it's just like sinking in where you do have to accept that in life, one of the universal laws is that everything is subject to change.
Yes.
So accepting that and kind of seeing new doors open as just to try to welcome it, it just made me feel a lot better. Number two, building resilience, which is including mindful practices and maintaining a support network and embracing a growth mindset. Then setting goals. Talk about the importance of setting realistic, flexible goals during transitions and how to break them down. Actually, this one as well in Korea, no, in Thailand, I forgot. I had this like really spiritual dream, and it was about my uncle. He's very trustworthy. He's been there for a family. Like he gave me a yellow book with a white sofa on the cover. And he's like, Grace, read this book. And I don't like to read books. And I was
Mm.
like, no, like that seems like a boring book. But then my uncle goes, this book is about a girl that faked it to make it, where she just kept like thinking about positive things and it's just like really manifested for her. And I just felt that in my dream to my core, the emotions that came with the dream. I knew that this was definitely like a spiritual sign. So I actually bought a yellow notebook and I'm writing down every single day, like my gratitude, what happened, reflection. And in a way, it's so cliche to do that. And it's like, how is that going to change your life? Right. But I'm really following my spiritual signs. And if you can build a positive habit like that day by day, then I do believe that it's like currency where you're building up positively little by little for it to actually be abundant.
Mhm.
So that's what I've been doing to cope with my change. And then learning, it says self care strategies, and then learning from experience, reflecting on past changes, lessons learned. And I think us talking about this and having an episode about it, it's just so healthy, and letting other people know like how we maneuver changes so that you guys can as well.
I love what you said about the journaling practice because I think that is really important. And it seems cliche, it seems simple. Like, how could sitting down and writing every day some things that you're grateful for actually change your life? But it's, if you think about anything, that's how things become second nature to us, is through practice, it's through repetition, it's through showing up and doing it over and over and over again, so that that state becomes more familiar to us. It becomes less scary. And then all of a sudden, like, that is what it is. It's like if you do anything, right? Like you're learning a new sport or something, and maybe it seems like really scary at first to be showing up to practice, and you kind of just want to like run away. You don't want to do it. You just want to kind of give up, or you tell yourself like, oh, you know, I'm still not good at this after like going to class for a whole week or going to practice for a whole week. It's like, well, you're still learning, you're still becoming familiar, whether it's a skill set that you're becoming familiar with, a state of being that you're becoming familiar with. And that's just really important. By the way, that whole aspect of like putting in real life, like practical efforts, is an earth quality. So earth
Mm.
signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, like this is one of the biggest strengths that you guys have. Is your ability to put in concerted effort into something and to show up like persistently, which is Taurus. It's showing up and putting repetition behind things. Virgo is routine. It's making something routine and not being afraid to like engage in this day-to-day practice of it, because it's also like daily routine in a sense. And then Capricorn is all about perseverance. It's about, even when things get tough, you still show up and you do it anyway. So this is something that we all can learn from earth signs, is like, you know, they really know how to be consistent with things, and how to show us how to make something more second nature in our like physical body, in our and in our
Mhm.
reality.
Yeah, I think I actually really like earth signs, or the idea of earth
Yeah.
signs, because my parents, maybe the more older generations that have traditional values, like I learned to really
Yeah.
appreciate that, because our parents show up every day. Like even if they go through hard times, they knew that divorce is not an option, and they try to work through it. Not saying that like that kind of works in this day and age, but I think this generation just really struggles with stability and like showing up. That's the thing that I just said like a few minutes ago, of somebody just keeping their word. And that's something that I really appreciate growing up, and I want to bring to my own family, to my own circle right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think my parents are the same. Like,
Mm,
I get that with everything there is more of like a positive and a negative that we can point out, right? Like younger generations are all about freedom and independence and all this stuff. And so because of that, yeah, in some form we might see a decline in certain traditional values, or, consistency and whatnot. Whereas, you can look at older generations and some people might criticize how rigid that is. But at the same time, there is something that they gain from that, which is an ability to show up consistently and to not just run away when the going gets tough, right? As they say, when the going gets tough, they're still there. They're like, well, we got to
mhm.
make this work. We have to figure it out. Or, the whole notion of like divorce is not an option, right? In relationships, some people are like, well, I guess that just means we got to figure out how to how to make this work.
Yeah. As a life coach, Emma, is there like one main advice you can give when it comes to, people struggling with change?
A few really important things for navigating change. First would be like acknowledging the resistance that you're having, and then trying to understand maybe like where that comes from. So I guess if I do this, let's just say I do this in steps. Step one would be acknowledge the resistance to change and understand where it comes from. So, if you're trying to get to know somebody new, but you've had past experiences that didn't go so very well, where maybe somebody cheated on you or they lied to you or whatever, this and that, um, being able to just acknowledge, like, oh, wow, I'm feeling a little bit like uncomfortable, like getting close to this person. I feel myself resisting this change of relationship status. Where does that come from? Why is that? Oh, okay, I've had some past experiences. Oh, I can see how those would make me feel unsafe, but maybe in this situation there's nothing that's giving me red flag energy. So at least acknowledging that at least brings it to your awareness, right? And awareness is important because even if it doesn't change the outcome, it enables you to make a different decision. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is important is to focus on what you can control. And I know what you said kind of alluded to this as well, right? Is like take steps, take one step at a time if that's what you have to do, but focus on what you can control. That's part of also building resilience, which I think is the point that you had made. Is persevering through things when they're difficult. And sometimes part of the way that you can I don't want to say make sure, but like kind of increase the chances that like you're able to make it through these changes, are to focus solely on what you can control and not the things that are out of your control. So that'd be the second thing. And then the third thing, it is to practice trust, to practice surrendering to whatever, to the universe, to just letting go, whatever, however it is that you want to say it. That would be one of the third things that I think is very important, is to just really practice that trust, to sit with yourself and ask, like, what does it actually look like for me to fully trust somebody? If I fully trusted in the universe, if I fully trusted in myself, if I fully trusted, well, let's just say if I fully trusted myself, what could my relationships look like? Oh, deeper intimacy, more fun, deeper connections, like whatever it is that you wanted, whatever, you know what I mean? Like for every person, it might look different. But understanding like what it looks like to be in that state of trust and in that state of flow, and then trying to come back to that through things like self-care practices, I think is also very helpful. Meditation, journaling, things like that. So similar to what you said, but I would say that those are three kind of like mindset shifts as well that we can make to help us navigate change.
Yeah, and especially during the Scorpio season, it's not just us. A lot of people who are listening are probably going through some crazy changes. So are we, right, as the Green Tea Podcast. So a little bit of change. So Emma and I really want to bring even higher quality episodes and have something really solid and stable each month, and to actually bring on more guests. So we are thinking of doing one episode a week or once every 3 weeks. It hasn't been 100% decided yet, but we really want to gather even more resources to bring just each higher quality episodes. So, what do you think, Emma?
Yeah. Wait, also, did you say one episode a week? One episode a month?
One episode a month or every 3 week, I
3
think
weeks.
I said.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much I'm on the same page as you. We definitely want to focus on quality over quantity. And I think as we've started to get, I mean, I guess I can only speak for myself, but as we've started to get more comfortable with like doing these episodes and getting the vibe between you and I and everybody listening in, thank you by the way. Yeah, I think quality is something that's really important, I think, to both of us. But also because we want to make sure that we're managing our own boundaries, our own time and things accordingly. And I think one of the ways that we can do that is also by modeling that to others. You know what I mean? Like there can be this big expectation, I think, when it comes to social media, but also just life in general, that like we're always putting out stuff and showing up and showing up and showing up, even with like coaching on social media. I'll see a lot of coaches talking about you have to show up consistently. It doesn't matter if you're having a bad day, show up, show up, show up. And I think, to be fair, there is some value in that. But I also think that sometimes, some people are prone to taking on way more than they can actually handle. And then they really suffer from it. But they're afraid to actually say, like, hey, I'm struggling and this is too much for me. How can we adjust this? So I think that that's another thing, too, that I'm hoping these changes will kind of give other, I don't want to say like give people permission, but in a way, I hope that this gives other people permission to know that, like, you know, you can make adjustments to things when you need to. And if you do feel like you need to slow it down a little bit or speed it up a little bit, there's no reason why you can't have the proper conversations and make that happen. We have to do
Yeah.
what works for all of us. And that's going to be different person to person.
And I think it changes by seasons as well. I think, once we have a lot more quality episodes and ideas, we might be back to even
Yeah.
weekly episodes.
Mhm.
Or I was even thinking about solo episodes. Maybe it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be both of us. Like
True.
maybe once a month we can take turns doing solo episodes. There is just a lot of things we can do, but yeah, I would love to see how this goes. And I would love some feedback from you guys listening.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of podcast attracts you guys, and what makes you want to listen, sit down for an hour? Let us know.
Yeah, please. We would love to know. We want to bring stuff that you guys, are interested in and that you actually find value in. So your feedback is really important to us. Definitely.
Yeah, if you think about it, we started our podcast back like February or March. So it's been like a good 7, 8 months. And I remember in the beginning, we even, worked with Vivaya. We had some great guests and we were brainstorming how we were going to do this exactly last year. I remember Emma and I, we were at a steak event and I just told her, I want to do a podcast. And she's like, me too. And now we manifested, like, what are we, episode 18, 19 now? Like,
Mhm.
just a lot of you guys, even like consistent listeners that are downloading every single month and like listening back. It's just really special. It's not really about numbers, it's about
Right.
connecting with people and having this conversation and creating something. We're literally creators.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's important.
Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. Let us know what kind of big changes you're having in your life and how you're maneuvering through them. See you guys in our next episode.
Time's been moving.